Heartbroken girl marries a stranger unaware he's a secret billionaire CEO. Hi everyone, welcome back to Love Scene Diaries, your go-to channel for the most gripping romance and drama stories. If you love tales of heartbreak, passion, and unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. And as you watch, let me know in the comments. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now let's dive into today's story. The invitation sat on Emma Carter's phone screen like a cruel joke. Her ex-boyfriend Ryan and her former best friend Jessica were getting married. The words felt like a dagger to her chest. "We'd love for you to join us on our special day." Emma's hand trembled as she stared at the email, her heart pounding in her chest. She could still hear Ryan's voice in her head, the way he used to call her his forever. Forever, it seemed, had an expiration date. And Jessica? The girl she had trusted with her deepest secrets? She had been the one to steal him away. The betrayal was still fresh, even though it had been 6 months since Emma had walked in on them together. She had replayed that moment in her mind 1,000 times. The way Ryan had stammered excuses, the way Jessica had looked at her with a mix of guilt and defiance. Emma had left that day with nothing but her dignity, but even that felt like it had been chipped away over time. Now they had the audacity to invite her to their wedding. Their wedding. Emma let out a bitter laugh, tossing her phone onto the couch. "Unbelievable," she muttered, running a hand through her dark auburn hair. She paced the small living room of her apartment, the walls closing in on her. The space was filled with reminders of the life she had once envisioned with Ryan. Photos she hadn't yet taken down, a throw blanket they had picked out together, even the coffee table he had built for her. Her chest tightened as anger bubbled up inside her. How dare they flaunt their happiness in her face as if she were some kind of afterthought. Emma sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. She had tried to move on, but the truth was, she felt stuck. Stuck in this small town where everyone knew her business. Stuck in a cycle of heartbreak and self-doubt. Stuck in a life that felt like it wasn't even hers anymore. But as she sat there, something shifted. A spark of defiance ignited within her. She wasn't going to let Ryan and Jessica's betrayal define her. She wasn't going to let them win. Emma grabbed her phone again, this time with purpose. She opened a travel app and began searching for destinations, anywhere that wasn't here. Her eyes landed on a remote mountain lodge tucked away in the snowy wilderness. It was perfect. Quiet, secluded, and far from the prying eyes of her small-town neighbors. Without overthinking it, she booked a week-long stay. The trip was impulsive, but that was the point. She needed to get away, to clear her head, to remind herself that there was a world beyond Ryan and Jessica. As she packed her bags later that evening, Emma caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Her green eyes, usually so full of life, looked tired and dull. She sighed, zipping up her suitcase. "Maybe I'll meet someone who'll make me forget all of this," she muttered under her breath, half joking. But deep down, a part of her wondered if it was possible. Could she really move on? Could she find someone who would see her for who she was, not as the girl who had been left behind? The next morning, Emma set off on her journey. The drive to the lodge was long and winding, the snow-covered trees blurring past her window. As she climbed higher into the mountains, the air grew colder and the world seemed quieter. It was exactly what she needed. A place to escape, to breathe, to start over. What Emma didn't know was that this trip would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. She was about to meet someone who would challenge everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and herself. And that someone? He was hiding a secret that would turn her world upside down. What would you do if you were in Emma's shoes? Have you ever experienced a betrayal like this? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Stay tuned, this is just the beginning. The snowstorm hit harder than Emma had expected. Thick flakes swirled in the air, blanketing the winding mountain road as her car's tires crunched over the icy surface. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white, as the GPS announced she was only a few minutes away from the lodge. Relief washed over her. After hours of driving, she was ready to leave the world and her problems behind. When she finally pulled into the small parking lot, the lodge looked like something out of a postcard. Warm light spilled from the windows of the rustic wooden building, illuminating the snow-covered pines surrounding it. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and the faint sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifted through the air. It was cozy, inviting, and exactly what Emma needed. She stepped out of the car, shivering as the icy wind bit at her cheeks. Pulling her coat tighter around her, she grabbed her suitcase and trudged toward the entrance. The moment she stepped inside, the warmth of the lodge enveloped her, and the scent of pine wood and cinnamon filled her senses. The front desk was manned by a cheerful older woman named Margaret, who greeted Emma with a wide smile. "Welcome to Snowfall Lodge. You must be Emma Carter." Emma nodded, brushing snow from her hair. "That's me. I'm so glad to finally be here." Margaret's smile faltered slightly as she glanced at her computer screen. "Well, I have some good news and some unexpected news." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Unexpected news?" Margaret hesitated. "It seems there's been a mix-up with the bookings. We're completely full because of the storm, and the cabin we had reserved for you was accidentally double-booked." Emma's heart sank. "You're kidding." "I'm so sorry, dear, but don't worry, we've worked something out. You'll be sharing the cabin with another guest. It's one of our larger ones, so you'll have plenty of space." Emma opened her mouth to protest, but before she could, the door behind her swung open, letting in a gust of cold air. She turned to see a tall man stepping inside, shaking snow from his dark hair. He was dressed in a simple black coat, but there was something about him that immediately caught her attention. Maybe it was the sharpness of his jawline, the quiet confidence in his posture, or the way his piercing blue eyes scanned the room with a calm intent. "Ah, Mr. Hayes," Margaret said, her tone brightening. "Perfect timing. This is Emma Carter. You'll be sharing the cabin with her." The man, Nate Hayes, glanced at Emma, his expression unreadable. "Sharing?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. Margaret nodded. "I explained the mix-up. I hope it won't be a problem." Emma crossed her arms, feeling a flicker of annoyance. "I wasn't exactly planning on sharing my getaway with a stranger." Nate's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. "Neither was I." Margaret clapped her hands together, clearly eager to diffuse the tension. "I promise, it'll be fine. The cabin is spacious and you'll hardly notice each other. Besides, with the storm, we don't have any other options." Emma sighed, realizing she didn't have much of a choice. "Fine," she muttered. Nate gave a small nod, his expression still unreadable. "Fine." The cabin was, as Margaret had promised, spacious and charming. A crackling fireplace dominated the main room, and large windows offered a stunning view of the snow-covered forest. There were 2 bedrooms on opposite sides of the cabin, ensuring privacy, but the shared living space meant Emma and Nate would inevitably cross paths. Emma set her suitcase down in her room and took a deep breath. She had come here to escape, to find peace, not to deal with an enigmatic stranger who seemed to have a permanent air of detachment. When she returned to the living room, Nate was already there, sitting on the couch with a book in his hands. He looked completely at ease, as if he belonged there, yet there was something about him that felt out of place. His clothes were simple, but the sleek, expensive watch on his wrist caught Emma's eye. It didn't match the modest surroundings of the lodge, or the man who seemed content to sit in silence. "Do you always read in the middle of a snowstorm?" Emma asked, breaking the silence. Nate glanced up, his blue eyes meeting hers. "Do you always ask questions you don't really care about the answers to?" Emma blinked, caught off guard by his response. "Wow, okay, I was just trying to make conversation." He closed the book, setting it on the coffee table. "Fair enough. What would you like to talk about?" His tone wasn't unkind, but there was a quiet challenge in his words that made Emma's cheeks flush. She wasn't used to people like Nate, calm, composed, and completely unreadable. "Never mind," she said, sitting down in the armchair across from him. "I'll just enjoy the silence." Nate smirked, the faintest hint of amusement flickering across his face. "Suit yourself." Over the next few hours, Emma tried to focus on relaxing, but Nate's presence was impossible to ignore. He moved through the cabin with an effortless grace, his every action deliberate and precise. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words were measured, as if he had carefully considered each one before speaking. Emma, on the other hand, found herself growing increasingly frustrated. She had come here to escape her problems, not to share a cabin with a man who seemed determined to keep her at arm's length. At dinner, the tension between them finally boiled over. "So, what brings you to a place like this?" Emma asked, her tone sharper than she intended. Nate looked up from his plate, his expression calm. "I needed a break." "From what?" He hesitated, his gaze flickering to the fire. "Life." Emma rolled her eyes. "Wow. That's specific." Nate's lips curved into a faint smile. "And what about you? What are you running from?" The question hit a nerve, and Emma's jaw tightened. "I'm not running. I'm taking a break." "From life?" he asked, echoing her earlier words. Emma glared at him, but before she could respond, Nate leaned back in his chair, his expression softening. "Look, I'm not trying to pry. We're both here for our own reasons. Let's just coexist." Emma sighed, her anger fading as quickly as it had flared. "Fine. Coexist." As the evening wore on, Emma found herself watching Nate more closely. There was something about him that didn't add up. He was too polished, too composed, and that watch, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Who was this man, really? Nate, for his part, seemed equally intrigued by Emma. Her fiery personality was a stark contrast to his quiet demeanor, and he found himself drawn to her in a way he couldn't quite explain. Neither of them said it out loud, but the unspoken tension between them was undeniable. What would you do if you were stuck in a cabin with a complete stranger? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. The snowstorm raged on outside, but inside the cabin, the tension between Emma and Nate had settled into an uneasy truce. They had spent the last 2 days coexisting, as Nate had put it, sharing meals and the occasional conversation. Emma had to admit there was something oddly comforting about his quiet presence, even if he was infuriatingly reserved. But that fragile peace shattered the moment Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her heart sinking when she saw the name. Ryan. For a moment she considered ignoring it. She had no reason to talk to him, no reason to let him worm his way back into her thoughts. But curiosity and maybe a little masochism got the better of her. She swiped to answer. "Hello? Emma?" Ryan's voice came through, smooth and familiar, but with an edge of smugness that made her stomach churn. "I just wanted to let you know, Jessica and I are getting married next month. Thought you'd want to hear it from me before the whole town starts talking." Emma's grip on the phone tightened. "Why would I care?" she snapped, though her voice betrayed the hurt she felt. Ryan chuckled, the sound grating in her ears. "Come on, Em. I know you're still hung up on me. I mean, you're spending the holidays alone in some cabin, right? Meanwhile, Jessica and I are building a life together. You should really move on." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She could feel the tears welling up, but she refused to let him hear her cry. "You're unbelievable," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "Good luck with your perfect little life." She hung up before he could respond, her hands trembling as she set the phone down on the table. The tears she had been holding back spilled over, and she buried her face in her hands, the weight of everything crashing down on her. "Emma." She looked up to see Nate standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable but his eyes filled with concern. She quickly wiped her tears away, embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable moment. "I'm fine," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Nate stepped closer, his gaze steady. "You don't look fine." Emma let out a bitter laugh. "Well, I'm not. My ex just called to tell me he's marrying my best friend, and apparently I'm pathetic for being here alone." Nate's jaw tightened, and for a moment he said nothing. Then, to her surprise, he sat down across from her. "Your ex sounds like an idiot." Emma blinked, caught off guard by the bluntness of his statement. "What?" "You heard me," Nate said, his tone calm but firm. "If he cheated on you and then had the audacity to call and rub it in your face, he's not worth your time. Or your tears." Emma stared at him, unsure how to respond. There was no pity in his voice, no condescension, just a quiet conviction that made her chest ache. Easier said than done, she muttered, looking away. Nate leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment. Then, with a faint smirk, he said, "You know what you should do?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Marry me." She froze, certain she had misheard him. "Excuse me?" Nate shrugged, his smirk widening. "Think about it. You want to prove to your ex that you've moved on, right? And I—" He hesitated, his expression softening. "I could use a little chaos in my life." Emma stared at him, her mind racing. Was he serious? He couldn't be serious. And yet, there was something in his eyes, a mix of mischief and sincerity, that made her pause. "That's insane," she said finally. "Maybe," Nate admitted. "But sometimes, a little insanity is exactly what we need." Emma opened her mouth to argue, but the words caught in her throat. The idea was ridiculous, impulsive, and completely out of character for her, but wasn't that the point? She had spent months feeling stuck, powerless, and broken. Maybe this was her chance to take control, to do something bold and unexpected. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nate's gaze didn't waver. Completely. The next morning, Emma found herself standing in the lodge's small event room, her heart pounding as she stared at her reflection in the mirror. She had borrowed a simple white dress from Margaret, who had been more than happy to help arrange the impromptu ceremony. "This is crazy," Emma muttered to herself, smoothing the fabric of the dress. "It's bold," Margaret said from behind her, a twinkle in her eye, "and sometimes bold is exactly what we need." Emma smiled faintly, her nerves settling just enough for her to take a deep breath. She wasn't sure what she was doing, but for the first time in months she felt alive. When she stepped into the room, Nate was waiting for her. He had traded his usual casual attire for a crisp white shirt and black slacks, and for a moment Emma forgot how to breathe. He looked different. Softer somehow. "You clean up well," she said, her voice teasing but her cheeks warm. Nate smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made her heart skip a beat. "You're not so bad yourself." The ceremony was simple and intimate, with Margaret officiating and a few lodge guests serving as witnesses. As they exchanged vows, Emma couldn't help but feel a strange mix of exhilaration and disbelief. This wasn't how she had imagined her life would go, but maybe that was the point. When it came time to sign the marriage certificate, Nate hesitated for the briefest of moments. Emma noticed the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but before she could say anything, he signed his name with a steady hand. Later that evening, as they sat by the fire in their cabin, Emma couldn't help but laugh. "I can't believe we actually did that." Nate raised an eyebrow. "Regretting it already?" "No," Emma said quickly, surprising herself with the truth of the word. "It's just surreal." Nate nodded, his gaze fixed on the flames. "Yeah, it is." For a moment they sat in comfortable silence, the crackling of the fire filling the room. Then Emma glanced at him, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Where did you do it?" she asked softly. Nate didn't look at her, but his expression grew thoughtful. "Because I needed to feel something real. And you're real." Emma's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing, letting the weight of his words settle between them. Do you believe in love at first sight, or in this case, love at first marriage? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. The snowstorm had finally passed, leaving the world outside blanketed in a pristine layer of white. The cabin, nestled deep in the woods, felt like a world of its own. Quiet, secluded, and untouched by the chaos of reality. For Emma, it was both a refuge and a strange new reality. She was married. To a man she barely knew. The first morning after the wedding, Emma woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of soft footsteps in the kitchen. She pulled on a sweater and padded out of her room, finding Nate standing by the stove flipping pancakes. The sight was so domestic, so unexpectedly normal, that she couldn't help but laugh. "You cook?" she asked, leaning against the doorway. Nate glanced over his shoulder, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I survived." Emma smirked, crossing her arms. "Well, I hope your survival skills include not burning the pancakes." He raised an eyebrow, flipping one onto a plate with practiced ease. "You'll have to let me know." As they sat down to eat, the silence between them was comfortable, almost companionable. Emma found herself watching Nate more closely, noticing the way he moved with quiet confidence, the way his blue eyes seemed to take in everything without giving much away. He was a mystery, and she couldn't decide if that intrigued her or annoyed her. Over the next few days they settled into an unspoken routine. Nate spent his mornings chopping wood or shoveling snow, while Emma curled up by the fire with her sketchbook. She hadn't drawn in months, not since Ryan's betrayal had sapped her creativity. But now, with the quiet of the cabin and the crisp mountain air, the urge to create was returning. At first her sketches were hesitant, her lines shaky and uncertain, but as the days passed, her confidence grew. She found herself pouring her emotions onto the page, anger, sadness, hope, all of it spilling out in a way that felt cathartic. One afternoon, as she sat by the window sketching the snow-covered trees, Nate walked in, his boots tracking in a trail of melted snow. He paused when he saw her drawing, his gaze lingering on the page. "You're good," he said simply. Emma looked up, startled. "What?" "Your sketches," he said, nodding toward the notebook. "They're good." She felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Thanks, it's just something I do to clear my head." Nate walked over, his expression thoughtful as he studied her work. "You should do more than that. You've got talent." Emma laughed softly, shaking her head. "I don't know about that." "I do," Nate said, his tone serious. "Don't sell yourself short." His words stayed with her long after he had left the room. It wasn't just what he said. It was the way he said it, like he genuinely believed in her. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time, and it made her chest ache in a way she couldn't quite explain. As the days turned into weeks, Emma and Nate's relationship began to shift. They shared meals, went on hikes through the snowy woods, and spent long evenings by the fire talking about everything and nothing. Emma found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't expected, sharing stories about her childhood, her dreams, and even her heartbreak. Nate, however, remained an enigma. He listened intently, his blue eyes never leaving hers, but when it came to his own past, he was frustratingly vague. "What about you?" Emma asked one night as they sat by the fire, mugs of hot cocoa in their hands. "What brought you to the lodge?" Nate hesitated, his gaze flickering to the flames. "I needed a break," he said finally. "From what?" "Life," he said, echoing the same answer he had given her before. Emma frowned, setting her mug down. "That's not an answer." Nate looked at her, his expression unreadable. "It's the only one I've got." The conversation ended there, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. There were little things, small inconsistencies in his stories. The way he avoided certain topics, and the expensive watch he always wore, which seemed out of place in their modest surroundings. One afternoon, while tidying up the living room, Emma found a business card tucked into the pages of a book Nate had left on the coffee table. The card read, "Hayes Innovations." She frowned, turning the card over in her hands. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. Before she could think too much about it, Nate walked in, and she quickly slipped the card back into the book. "Find something interesting?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes sharp. Emma shook her head, forcing a smile. "Just cleaning up." Nate didn't press the issue, but Emma couldn't help but feel like she had stumbled onto something important. Despite the lingering questions, Emma couldn't deny the growing connection between them. There was a warmth to Nate that she hadn't noticed at first, a quiet kindness that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. But with that warmth came fear. Emma had been burned before, and the thought of letting herself fall for someone again, especially someone as guarded as Nate, terrified her. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Nate turned to her, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "You ever think about what's next?" he asked. Emma frowned, caught off guard by the question. "What do you mean?" "For us," he said, his gaze steady. "This, whatever this is, do you think it's real?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to say yes, to tell him that she felt something real and undeniable between them. But the words caught in her throat, fear holding her back. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Nate nodded, his expression unreadable. "Fair enough." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken words and unacknowledged feelings. As the days passed, the tension between them grew. Emma found herself watching Nate more closely, searching for answers to the questions swirling in her mind. Who was he, really? And why did he feel so familiar yet so distant? Nate, for his part, seemed to be wrestling with his own demons. He was kind and attentive, but there was a guardedness to him that Emma couldn't break through. One night, as they sat by the fire, Emma finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been nagging at her. "Nate," she said softly, "why did you marry me?" He looked at her, his blue eyes filled with something she couldn't quite name. "Because I needed to feel something real," he said simply. Emma's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to believe him, to trust that his words were genuine, but a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that there was more to the story, more to Nate than he was letting on. The honeymoon phase ends with Emma and Nate growing closer, but the seeds of conflict have been planted. Emma's rediscovery of herself through her art and Nate's encouragement deepen their bond, but his reluctance to share his past and the hints of his secret create a tension that keeps viewers hooked. What would you do if you noticed someone you cared about was hiding something? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. The cabin was quiet, save for the soft crackle of the fire. Emma sat cross-legged on the couch, her sketchbook balanced on her lap. She had been working on a new piece for hours, losing herself in the rhythm of pencil strokes and shading. Nate had gone out for a walk, leaving her alone with her thoughts. As she reached for her phone to check the time, it buzzed with a notification. Curious, she unlocked it and saw an email from a local art gallery she had once dreamed of working with. The subject line read, "We'd love to see more of your work." Her heart leapt. It was the first time in months she had felt like her art was worth something. She quickly opened the email, but as she scrolled, her finger accidentally tapped on a link in her browser history. The page that loaded wasn't the gallery's website. Instead, it was a news article. The headline made her freeze. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. The photo accompanying the article was unmistakable. Nate, her Nate, stood in a sleek black tuxedo, his arm around an elegant woman in a glittering gown. The caption read, "Nathaniel Hayes, billionaire CEO of Hayes Innovations, attends the annual gala in New York City." Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the article. It detailed Nate's rise to success, his reputation as a brilliant but reclusive businessman, and his company's groundbreaking work in renewable energy. The more she read, the more her stomach churned. How could this be the same man who chopped wood in the mornings and made pancakes in their tiny cabin? The man who had married her on a whim, claiming he needed something real? Emma's mind reeled. She thought back to all the little clues she had ignored, the expensive watch, the business card, his reluctance to talk about his past. It all made sense now. He hadn't been hiding a painful past or a broken heart. He had been hiding this. The sound of the door opening snapped her out of her thoughts. Nate stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. He looked up and immediately noticed the expression on her face. "Emma?" he asked, his voice cautious. She stood, holding up her phone. "Care to explain this?" Nate's eyes flicked to the screen, and his expression shifted. For the first time since she had met him, he looked genuinely caught off guard. "Where did you find that?" he asked quietly. "It doesn't matter where I found it," Emma snapped. "What matters is that you lied to me. You're not just some guy who needed a break. You're a billionaire CEO, Nate, or should I say Nathaniel Hayes?" Nate sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emma, I can explain." "Explain what?" she interrupted, her voice rising. "That you've been lying to me this whole time? That you let me think you were just some normal guy while you were hiding this whole other life?" "It's not like that," Nate said, his tone calm but firm. "I didn't lie to you. I just didn't tell you everything." Emma let out a bitter laugh. Oh well, that makes it so much better. Nate stepped closer, his blue eyes pleading. Emma, I didn't tell you because I didn't want us, to be about that. I wanted something real, something that wasn't tied to my name or my money. Emma shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. Do you even hear yourself? You married me, Nate. You made me think we were starting something honest, and the whole time you were keeping this huge part of your life from me. How is that real? Nate opened his mouth to respond, but Emma held up a hand, stopping him. You know what? It doesn't matter. I can't do this. I can't be with someone who doesn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. Emma, please, Nate said, his voice breaking. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. Well, you figured out how to keep it a secret, she shot back. So I'm sure you'll figure out how to move on. With that, she grabbed her coat and stormed out of the cabin, slamming the door behind her. The drive back to her small-town apartment was a blur. Emma's mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness. She had thought she was finally starting to heal, to move on from the pain Ryan had caused. But now, it felt like she was right back where she started. When she arrived home, the familiar sight of her tiny apartment felt both comforting and suffocating. She dropped her bags by the door and sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. How had everything gone so wrong? Back at the cabin, Nate sat by the fire, staring at the flames. The silence was deafening, the emptiness of the room a stark contrast to the warmth Emma had brought into his life. He had known this moment might come. From the moment he had met Emma, he had wrestled with the decision to tell her the truth. But every time he tried, the words got caught in his throat. He had been afraid that she would see him differently, that she would treat him the way everyone else did. And now, his fear had cost him the one thing he had wanted most, her. Nate leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He thought back to the night they had gotten married, the way Emma had looked at him with a mix of defiance and hope. She had been so raw, so real, and he had been drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. He had told himself that keeping his identity a secret was the right thing to do, that it would protect what they had. But now he realized how wrong he had been. By hiding the truth, he had betrayed the very trust he had wanted to build. Nate closed his eyes, the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him. He didn't blame Emma for leaving. She had every right to be angry, but the thought of losing her, of never seeing her fiery green eyes, or hearing her laugh again was almost too much to bear. For the first time in years, Nate felt truly lost. What would you do if you discovered your partner was hiding a huge secret? Would you forgive them or would you walk away? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. The knock on Emma's door came late in the evening, startling her out of her thoughts. She had been sitting on the couch, staring at a half-finished sketch that had been mocking her for hours. Since leaving the cabin, her creativity had dried up, replaced by a gnawing ache in her chest that she couldn't seem to shake. She frowned, glancing at the clock. It was nearly 9 p.m. Who would be visiting her at this hour? Rising from the couch, she padded to the door and opened it cautiously. Her breath caught in her throat. Nate stood there, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim glow of the hallway light. He looked different, disheveled, almost vulnerable. His usually composed demeanor was gone, replaced by an expression of raw emotion that made Emma's heart twist. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Nate didn't answer right away. Instead, he held out a large leather portfolio and a folded piece of paper. "I need you to hear me out," he said quietly. Emma hesitated, her fingers tightening on the doorframe. Part of her wanted to slam the door in his face to protect herself from the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. But the look in his eyes stopped her. There was no arrogance, no defensiveness, just a quiet desperation that she couldn't ignore. With a sigh, she stepped aside, letting him in. Nate stood awkwardly in the middle of her small living room, clutching the portfolio like it was a lifeline. Emma crossed her arms, keeping her distance. "You have 5 minutes," she said, her tone guarded. Nate nodded, setting the portfolio on the coffee table. He unfolded the piece of paper and handed it to her. "This is for you." Emma took it reluctantly, her eyes scanning the handwritten words. It was a letter, and as she read, her defenses began to crack. Emma, I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me easily. But I need you to know the truth, not just about who I am, but about why I kept it from you. When I met you, I was running. Not from the world, but from myself. My life has always been defined by my name, my money, and the expectations that come with them. I've spent years surrounded by people who only see me as a means to an end. But you saw me, the real me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't tell you the truth because I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew who I was, you'd see me differently. That what we had would change. But in trying to protect what we had, I ended up breaking it. And for that, I'm sorry. I love you, Emma. Not because you're beautiful or talented, though you are both, but because you're real. You make me want to be better, to be honest, to be vulnerable. And I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. Nate. Emma's hands trembled as she finished reading. She looked up at Nate, her vision blurred by tears. You love me? She whispered. Nate nodded, his voice steady but soft. I do. More than I've ever loved anyone. Emma's heart ached at the sincerity in his voice, but the pain of his betrayal still lingered. You lied to me, Nate. You made me feel like I couldn't trust you. I know, he said, his gaze unwavering, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that you can. But first, there's something else I need to show you. He opened the portfolio, revealing a collection of her sketches, pieces she had sold at local art fairs and online over the years. Emma's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages, recognizing each one. These are mine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nate nodded. I bought them, not because I wanted to keep a secret from you, but because I believed in you. Your art deserves to be seen, Emma, and I wanted to support you, even if you didn't know it was me. Emma's fingers brushed over the pages, her emotions swirling in a chaotic mix of anger, gratitude, and something deeper. She looked up at Nate, her voice trembling. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to think I was trying to buy your affection, he said. I wanted you to know that I saw you not just as an artist, but as a person, and I didn't want my name or my money to get in the way of that. Emma stared at him, her walls slowly crumbling. She could see the truth in his eyes, the vulnerability he had been so afraid to show. And in that moment, she realized something that terrified her. She loved him too. Not because he was a billionaire or because he had supported her art, but because of the man he was, the man who had made her laugh, who had encouraged her, who had seen her when she felt invisible. I've been pushing you away, she admitted, her voice breaking. Not because of who you are, but because I was scared of getting hurt again, scared of letting myself feel something real. Nate stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. You don't have to be scared, Emma. I'm not perfect, and I'll probably screw up again, but I promise you I'll always be honest with you from now on. No more secrets. Emma's tears spilled over as she closed the distance between them. I don't care about your money, Nate. I care about you, and I love you too. The words hung in the air for a moment before Nate pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Emma buried her face in his chest, letting herself feel the weight of the moment, the pain, the relief, the love. They spent the rest of the evening talking, their words raw and unfiltered. Nate told her about his life, his struggles and his fears. Emma shared her own insecurities, her dreams and her hopes for the future. By the time the sun rose, they had made a promise to each other, to be honest, to be vulnerable, and to face whatever came next, together. Have you ever had to take a leap of faith in love? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartfelt tales like this one. The grand opening of Emma's design studio was a modest affair, but to her it felt like the culmination of everything she had fought for. The small space, nestled in the heart of her hometown, was bright and inviting, with her sketches framed on the walls and a work table covered in tools and materials. A sign above the door read, Emma Hayes Design Studio. She had debated whether to use Nate's last name. It wasn't about the money or the prestige, it was about embracing the life they were building together. And now, as she stood in the middle of the studio, surrounded by friends, family, and a few curious locals, she felt a sense of pride she hadn't experienced in years. Nate stood by her side, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. He had been her biggest supporter throughout the process, encouraging her to take risks and reminding her of her talent whenever she doubted herself. But he had also given her space, letting her make her own decisions and build something that was entirely hers. "You did it," he said softly, his voice filled with pride. Emma turned to him, her green eyes shining. "We did it." The weeks leading up to the studio's opening had been a whirlwind of activity. Emma had thrown herself into the work, designing everything from custom invitations to intricate home decor pieces. She had even started taking commissions, her confidence growing with each new project. Nate had been there every step of the way, but not in the way she had expected. Instead of trying to take over or solve her problems with his wealth, he had become her sounding board, her cheerleader, and occasionally her late-night coffee delivery service. One evening, as they sat on the floor of the studio, surrounded by paint swatches and fabric samples, Emma had looked at him and realized just how much he had changed. The guarded, reserved man she had met at the lodge was gone, replaced by someone who was open, supportive, and deeply invested in her happiness. "You're really good at this," he had said, holding up one of her sketches. Emma had laughed, shaking her head. "You're biased." "Maybe," he had admitted, a playful smile tugging at his lips. "But I'm also right." The day of the studio's opening, Emma's parents arrived early, bringing a bouquet of wildflowers and enough baked goods to feed an army. Her mother fussed over the displays, while her father beamed with pride, telling anyone who would listen about his daughter's talent. Even Ryan showed up, though he lingered awkwardly near the door, clearly unsure of his welcome. Emma had been surprised to see him, but when he offered a quiet congratulations, she had simply nodded, feeling a strange sense of closure. It wasn't until later, when the crowd had thinned and the sun was setting, that Emma finally had a moment to herself. She stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street, and let out a deep breath. "You okay?" Nate's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him watching her, his blue eyes warm and steady. "I'm more than okay," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "I'm happy." Nate stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "You deserve this, Emma. All of it." She looked up at him, her heart full. "So do you." A few weeks later, they stood in a small garden behind the studio, surrounded by their closest friends and family. The air was warm, the scent of blooming flowers filling the space. It was a far cry from their impulsive wedding at the lodge, but that was exactly what they wanted, a fresh start built on honesty and love. Emma wore a simple white dress, her hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. Nate stood beside her in a tailored suit, his expression soft and full of emotion. Margaret, the lodge owner who had officiated their first wedding, stood before them once again, a knowing smile on her face. "This time," Margaret said, her voice light with humor, "I think you two actually know what you're getting into." The small crowd laughed, and Emma felt her cheeks flush. She glanced at Nate, who was already looking at her, his gaze steady and unwavering. When it was time to exchange vows, Nate went first. He took Emma's hands in his voice low but clear. "Emma, when I met you, I was lost. I didn't know who I was or what I wanted, but you changed that. You showed me what it means to be real, to be vulnerable, and to love without fear. I promise to stand by you, to support you, and to never hide from you again. You are my heart, my home, and my everything." Emma blinked back tears, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Nate, you came into my life when I least expected it, and you turned everything upside down. You challenged me, supported me, and believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. I promise to love you for who you are, not for your name or your money, but for the man who makes me laugh, who holds me when I cry, and who sees me for who I really am. You are my partner, my best friend, and my forever." As they exchanged rings, the crowd erupted into cheers, and Emma felt a sense of peace settle over her. This wasn't just a renewal of vows. It was a promise to move forward together, stronger than ever. Later that evening, as they danced under the stars, Emma rested her head on Nate's shoulder, her heart full. "Do you think we'll ever stop surprising each other?" she asked softly. Nate chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I hope not." Emma smiled, closing her eyes as they swayed to the music. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, standing on her own 2 feet, but with someone she loved by her side. What's your favorite part of a love story? The beginning, the challenges, or the happily ever after? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming tales like this one. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of their cozy home, casting a warm glow over the kitchen. Emma stood at the counter, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, watching Nate as he flipped pancakes with the same quiet focus he always had. It had become their little tradition. Sunday mornings spent together, no rush, no distractions, just the two of them. But today Emma's heart raced with anticipation. She had been holding onto a secret for days, waiting for the right moment to tell him, and now as she watched him hum softly to himself, she knew the time had come. "Nate," she said, her voice steady but soft. He glanced over his shoulder, a smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah?" She set her mug down, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "There's something I need to tell you." Nate turned off the stove, his full attention now on her. His blue eyes searched hers, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "What is it?" Emma took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "I'm pregnant." For a moment the room was completely still. Nate's expression shifted from surprise to disbelief, and then to something so tender and full of joy that Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. "You're serious?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma nodded, a smile breaking through her nervousness. "I found out a few days ago. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Nate crossed the room in 2 quick strides, pulling her into his arms. He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. "Emma," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. This is amazing." She laughed softly, her tears spilling over. "You're not scared?" "Terrified," he admitted, pulling back just enough to look at her. "But in the best way possible. I can't think of anyone I'd rather do this with." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with love for the man who had become her partner in every sense of the word. "Me neither." The rest of the day passed in a blur of excitement and quiet moments. They sat together on the couch, talking about the future, names, nursery ideas, and all the little details that suddenly felt so important. Nate's hand never left hers, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a soothing rhythm. As the sun began to set, they decided to take a walk through the nearby park. The air was crisp, the leaves crunching under their feet as they strolled hand in hand. Emma leaned into Nate's side, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. "You know," she said, her voice thoughtful, "if someone had told me a year ago that I'd be here, married, starting a family, I would have laughed in their face." Nate chuckled, squeezing her hand. "Same here. Life has a funny way of surprising us." Emma looked up at him, her green eyes shining. "I'm glad it did." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Me too." For a moment they stood there, the world around them fading into the background. Nate reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I love you, Emma. More than I ever thought I could love anyone." She smiled, her heart full. "I love you too. And I'm so glad we took a chance on each other." As they continued their walk, Emma thought about everything they had been through. The impulsive marriage, the secrets, the heartbreak, and the healing. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. They had learned to trust each other, to be vulnerable, and to embrace the messy, beautiful reality of love. And now, as they prepared to start the next chapter of their lives, Emma felt ready, not because everything was perfect, but because they were in it together. Love isn't about perfection, it's about trust, vulnerability, and the willingness to grow together. Emma and Nate's story is a testament to the power of second chances and the beauty of accepting each other's flaws. As they reached the edge of the park, the first stars began to appear in the evening sky. Nate paused, looking up at the twinkling lights. You know, he said, his voice thoughtful, I think our baby's going to be a dreamer, just like their mom. Emma laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. And maybe a little stubborn, just like their dad. Nay grinned, wrapping an arm around her. We're in trouble, aren't we? Definitely, she said, her voice filled with warmth. Hand in hand, they walked back toward their home, ready to face whatever the future held. Together. Do you believe in second chances? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more love stories.